The jungle was alive with the sound of rain dripping from the high canopy, but the human, Daniel Ward, heard something else. A scream. It wasn't an animal's cry, it was sharper, filled with fear. It cut through the damp air and sent a rush of adrenaline through him. Daniel froze, his hand tightening on the handle of his machete. He had been walking for hours, scouting the dense alien wilderness, but this sound changed everything. He took a slow breath and started moving toward it, careful not to snap any branches underfoot. Every step was deliberate, his senses sharpened. The scream came again, closer this time, and it echoed through the trees like a desperate plea for help. Daniel crouched low, pushing past massive ferns and tangled roots, his eyes scanning for movement. The humidity clung to his skin, making his shirt stick to his back. He was deep in uncharted territory, and he knew that meant two things: danger and secrets. His boots sank into the soft mud, but he didn't care. Someone was in trouble. As he moved closer, he began to hear other sounds: the crackle of fire, guttural chanting, and the metallic clink of something turning over. His pulse quickened. The air smelled of smoke and charred wood. Daniel slowed, keeping low as he crept toward a small rise in the ground. From there, he could see flickering light between the thick jungle trunks. He moved forward until he could peer through the leaves. What he saw made his stomach tighten. In the center of a clearing, a large fire burned in a pit, sending sparks into the air. Around it stood a group of tall, lean aliens with dark green skin, their bodies covered in tribal paint and scars. They wore bone necklaces and carried long spears tipped with jagged metal. Their eyes glowed faintly in the firelight, and they were chanting in a low, rhythmic tone. Above the flames, held on a spit made of metal rods, was a young alien woman. Her skin was a vibrant shade of violet, smooth and flawless, even in the fire's harsh glow. Her long silver-white hair tumbled over her shoulders, and her green-gold eyes were wide with fury and fear. Her wrists and ankles were bound tightly with braided cords, and she strained against them, muscles tense. The heat from the fire licked at her, and beads of sweat shimmered on her skin. Daniel could see the firelight reflecting off a faint layer of dust or ash clinging to her bare midriff. She shouted something in a language he didn't know, her voice strong despite her position. Daniel's grip on his machete tightened until his knuckles turned white. He had seen strange things on this world, but nothing like this. She wasn't just a prisoner, they were preparing to kill her. The chanting grew louder, the fire flaring higher as if feeding on the tension. Daniel's gaze darted around the camp. Behind the fire, crude tents made from animal hides formed a half-circle. Skewers of meat hung drying from wooden racks. Weapons lay in a pile to the left. The aliens' attention was fixed on their captive, none of them watching the shadows beyond the firelight. That was their mistake. Daniel scanned for a path in. There was no time for careful planning. Heat shimmered in the air around her, and he could already see her legs twitching from the strain of being bound above the flames. His heart pounded in his ears. He could either walk away and pretend he hadn't heard the scream, or he could do something insane. He had never been good at walking away. He eased backward, circling wide to avoid the main entrance to the camp. His eyes stayed locked on the captive. She was still shouting, her voice breaking slightly now, but it carried a tone of defiance. She wasn't begging, she was daring them. That alone made Daniel's decision final. The jungle was on his side here. The deep shadows, the thick undergrowth, the muffling sound of dripping leaves, all of it masked his movement. He crawled low, avoiding the light, until he was behind one of the smaller tents. From here, he could see the alien warriors more clearly. There were 7 of them, each wearing crude armor made from hide and bone. The largest one, standing near the fire, wore a headdress of feathers and bones, and his voice carried over the others in the chant. Daniel's gaze flicked to the alien girl again. Her eyes caught his for a split second through the flicker of the flames. He didn't know if she saw him or if it was just chance, but her head lifted slightly, and the faintest spark of something, hope, maybe flashed across her face. That was all he needed. He adjusted his grip on the machete and looked around for a distraction. A few meters away, a stack of dry wood leaned against a tent. If he could topple it into the fire from the shadows, the sudden blaze and smoke might give him an opening. But he also knew one mistake could turn the whole camp's attention on him. Before he even got close, the chanting reached a fever pitch. The leader raised his spear high, pointing it toward the bound girl. The flames roared, casting wild shadows across the clearing. Daniel's muscles tensed like coiled steel. This was it. He wasn't going to watch her die. He took a deep breath, ready to move into the FIRELIGHT. Daniel moved before his mind could argue. In 3 long strides, he was at the stack of wood. He gripped the top logs and shoved them hard toward the fire. They tumbled forward with a loud crash, sparks exploding upward as the flames leapt higher. The chanting faltered as the aliens turned toward the sudden burst of heat and light. He used the moment. Slipping from the shadows, Daniel closed the distance to the spit. The heat slammed into him like a wall, and the acrid scent of burning wood filled his lungs. The alien girl's eyes locked on his. She looked shocked, but she didn't waste time questioning who he was. Instead, she twisted her wrists toward him. Daniel reached for the knots binding her hands, sawing through the thick rope with his machete's edge. The fibers resisted, but he pressed harder, ignoring the shouts that rose behind him. The chanting had turned into sharp, angry cries. Footsteps pounded the ground. One of the warriors lunged forward, spear aimed at Daniel's back. A sudden snap rang out as the rope gave way. The girl's arms fell free, and she clutched the spit's frame to keep from falling into the flames. Daniel swung his machete behind him in a wild arc. The blade caught the warrior's spear shaft, knocking it aside. The alien stumbled, giving Daniel the space to cut the bindings on her ankles. She dropped from the spit, landing hard on her knees, but she was already scrambling to her feet. Her movements were quick, almost cat-like, and Daniel could see that she was stronger than she looked. The fire lit her skin in flashes of gold and purple as she darted behind him. The largest alien, the one with the feathered headdress, let out a roar that shook the clearing. He charged, spear raised high. Daniel barely had time to shift his stance before the man's weapon came stabbing down. He blocked with his machete, the clash sending vibrations up his arm. The alien was fast, but Daniel fought with raw determination. The alien girl didn't run. Instead, she snatched a dropped spear from the ground. With a sharp cry, she jabbed the point toward another warrior who was circling to Daniel's side. The strike wasn't fatal, but it was enough to make the warrior stumble back in pain. "Move!" she shouted in accented but clear English. Daniel didn't need to be told twice. He kicked a burning log toward the approaching warriors, scattering embers in their path, and grabbed the girl's arm. They sprinted toward the edge of the camp, weaving between the tents. Arrows hissed past them, one grazing Daniel's shoulder. He ignored the sting and kept moving. The jungle loomed ahead, dark and thick with vines. If they could reach it, they might vanish into the shadows. But the aliens were close behind, their heavy footsteps pounding the ground. They dove into the undergrowth, branches slapping against their faces. The fire's light faded quickly, replaced by the deep green darkness of the jungle. Daniel's lungs burned, but he didn't slow until the sounds of pursuit began to fade. The girl was still holding his arm, her grip strong enough to leave marks. When they finally stopped, both were breathing hard. Daniel glanced at her, now seeing her more clearly without the firelight distorting her features. She was stunning. Her eyes bright even in the dim light, her lips pressed into a tight line. Her hair clung damply to her shoulders, and her chest rose and fell with quick breaths. "Who are you?" he asked between breaths. She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder into the darkness before meeting his gaze. "Name is Kayla, and you are not from this world." Daniel gave a small, humorless smile. You could say that. Why were they going to kill you? Kayla's jaw tightened. Not kill. Sacrifice. My people, we were captured. The tribe believes spilling royal blood will make the forest bless their hunt. I am royal blood. Daniel blinked. You're a princess? Her expression didn't change. Yes, and if they find us again, they will not fail. He nodded slowly, the weight of the situation settling on him. Saving her had just made him the enemy of a violent tribe, and maybe others. Then we keep moving, he said. Kayla tilted her head, studying him for a moment. You risked your life for me. Why? Daniel didn't have an answer ready. He thought of the moment he'd heard her scream, the way something inside him had pushed him forward before he could think. Because I couldn't walk away. For the first time, a flicker of a smile crossed her face. But it faded quickly as distant drums began to thump in the direction of the camp. The sound rolled through the trees, steady and ominous. They are calling the hunt, Kayla said, her voice low. Daniel tightened his grip on his machete. Then we'd better make them regret it. The jungle seemed to close in around them as they began to move again. Every shadow could be hiding a hunter, every rustle in the leaves a sign of danger. But neither slowed. Somewhere deep inside, Daniel knew this wasn't just a rescue anymore. Whatever he had stepped into was bigger, deadlier, and it had only just begun. The jungle at night was a different beast. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of wet earth and the hum of unseen creatures. Every sound seemed sharper, now the snap of a twig, the distant call of some predator, and most worrying, the rhythmic pounding of the drums that followed. Them. Daniel moved quickly but carefully, stepping where the ground was firm and avoiding noisy brush. Beside him, Kayla kept pace with surprising ease, her bare feet making no sound on the forest floor. The drums were steady, relentless, and each beat sent a shiver through the darkness. Daniel knew what it meant. These hunters weren't giving up. The tribe was organized, and they would track them until one side fell. He glanced at Kayla, who was scanning their surroundings with sharp eyes. Even in the low light, he could see. Her jaw tightened each time the drums grew louder. They will try to cut us off, she said quietly. They know the paths. If we move in a straight line, we will run into them. Daniel slowed, thinking. Then we don't move in a straight line. He changed direction, angling left through a denser patch of jungle. The plants here were thicker, the air damp with mist. Vines hung from towering trees like curtains, and the ground dipped into shallow pools of water. Mosquito-like insects swarmed around them, their wings buzzing in the heavy air. After a while, the sound of the drums began to fade, replaced by the croak of unseen amphibians. Daniel hoped it meant they'd shaken their pursuers, but Kayla's expression didn't ease. She kept glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear from the shadows. Suddenly, she stopped and held up a hand. Daniel froze. There was movement ahead, just a ripple of leaves, but it was enough. A moment later, two figures stepped out from behind a tree. Both were tribal warriors, their skin painted in streaks of black and red. They carried short spears and curved knives, their eyes locking instantly on the pair. Daniel reacted first. He shoved Kayla to the side and stepped forward, machete raised. The first warrior lunged, but Daniel caught the spear shaft with his blade and twisted hard, wrenching it free. The warrior snarled and swung his knife, but Daniel ducked under the slash and drove his shoulder into the alien's chest. The impact sent them both crashing to the ground. The second warrior rushed Kayla, but she moved like lightning. She sidestepped. The spear thrust and grabbed the shaft, yanking it forward so the alien stumbled off balance. Then, with a sharp twist, she drove the blunt end into his stomach, forcing the air from his lungs. She grabbed the knife from his belt and stood ready. Daniel rolled away from the first warrior's grasp, swinging his machete in a quick arc that left a deep gash in the alien's arm. The warrior screamed and fell back, clutching the wound. The second one, still gasping from Kayla's blow, tried to retreat, but she stepped in and pressed the knife to his throat. "They will not stop," she said coldly, staring into the warrior's eyes. "Go back. Tell them we are not prey." She released him with a shove, and he stumbled into the darkness, dragging the wounded one with him. Daniel stood, wiping sweat from his brow. "You fight better than I expected." Kayla didn't smile. "I was trained to survive. Royal blood means nothing if you cannot defend it." She glanced toward the deeper jungle. "We must keep moving. The drums will start again soon." They pressed on, the trees closing tighter around them. The path narrowed until they were forced to move single file. At one point, they had to wade through waist-deep water, the cold seeping into Daniel's bones. Somewhere nearby, something large moved through the water, its ripple spreading toward them, but it never showed itself. When they reached dry ground again, Kayla led them toward a massive tree whose trunk was wide enough to hide 3 people. Its roots twisted into natural hollows, forming a sheltered spot. "We rest here," she said, lowering herself to the ground. Daniel sat opposite her, leaning his machete against the trunk. "You're sure they won't find us here?" Her gaze lifted to the canopy above. "Nothing is certain, but they will slow at night. Even hunters fear some parts of this jungle." He frowned. "And we don't?" She met his eyes. "We don't have the luxury of fear." For a moment, silence settled between them. The tension of the escape still hung heavy, but in the quiet, Daniel found himself studying her face. The firelight back at the camp had painted her in golden shadow, but here, in the muted glow of bioluminescent plants scattered along the roots, he could see the fine lines of her features. She was beautiful, yes, but there was also something fierce in her eyes, a strength born from hardship. The stillness didn't last. Somewhere far off, the drums started again. Slower this time, but each beat echoed like a warning through the night air. Kayla rose, her muscles tense. "They're circling us." Daniel stood, gripping his machete. "Then we move before they close in." They slipped back into the jungle, leaving the shelter behind. The air grew colder, and the plants changed taller, darker, with leaves that whispered when brushed. Daniel's instincts screamed they were being watched. And as they passed under a massive arch of vines, a faint glimmer of eyes flashed in the shadows ahead. Kayla's voice dropped to a whisper. "They're not tribal hunters." Daniel's jaw tightened. Whoever or whatever waited ahead was something new. And in this jungle, new rarely meant safe. The eyes in the shadows didn't blink. They hovered low to the ground, shifting slightly, as if their owner was crawling closer. Daniel tightened his grip on the machete, his knuckles pale. Beside him, Kayla's stance shifted, her weight balanced on the balls of her feet. Spear angled forward. From the darkness ahead came a slow, guttural growl. The sound was deep, vibrating through the ground under Daniel's boots. Leaves rustled, and then something moved, a ripple in the darkness, a shape larger than a man, slipping silently between the trees. "It's a stalker beast," Kayla whispered. "They hunt by scent. The blood on you from the fight will draw." Daniel didn't like the sound of that. "Can we kill it?" She hesitated. "Not easily." The growl came again, closer now. Daniel scanned the shadows and caught a glimpse of it, 4 legs, long and sinewy, covered in dark, mottled scales that blended with the undergrowth. Its head was low, teeth glinting faintly in the dim light from the glowing plants around them. The creature's movements were smooth, deliberate, predatory. The drums were still faint in the distance, but they no longer seemed urgent compared to the thing stalking them now. Daniel took a step back, eyes locked on the beast. "We can't. Stay here. Move." Kayla nodded, and they began to edge sideways, keeping the creature in sight. But the beast mirrored them, gliding through the shadows like liquid. Then, without warning, it lunged. Daniel swung the machete in a wide arc, the blade clanging against the beast's thick hide. The impact knocked it off course, but its momentum still sent Daniel sprawling into the mud. Kayla darted forward, jabbing her spear into the creature's side. It let out a sharp hissing roar, swiping at her with claws that tore into the ground where she had been standing. Daniel rolled to his feet, heart pounding, and came at it from the other side. This time, he aimed for the neck. The machete bit. Deeper and dark blood sprayed across the leaves. The beast howled, twisting violently to shake him off. Kayla took the chance to thrust her spear again, this time into its chest. The creature's movements became jerky, desperate, with a final, guttural snarl. It staggered back into the shadows, vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared. The only sign of it was the blood smeared on the leaves and the deep claw marks in the earth. Daniel's breath came hard and fast. "Tell me they don't travel in packs." Kayla gave him a grim look. "Sometimes they do. We should keep moving." They pushed deeper into the jungle, this time at a faster pace. The glow of the bioluminescent plants grew brighter in patches, painting the undergrowth in eerie greens and blues. Strange insects zipped through the air, their wings humming like faint electric wires. After nearly an hour of moving, they came upon a rocky outcrop that overlooked a narrow gorge. A small stream glimmered at the bottom, winding through jagged stones. Daniel scanned the area, noting that the high ground gave them a better view. "We can rest here for a bit." Kayla didn't argue, but she remained standing, watching the trees with sharp focus. The tribe will cross the river soon. We have maybe an hour before they reach this point. Daniel sat on a flat rock, letting the cool night air dry the sweat on his skin. His mind kept replaying the fight with the stalker beast. It had been fast, smart, and unafraid. Whatever hunted in this jungle wasn't just dangerous, it was built to kill. "You've done this before," he said suddenly. Kayla glanced at him. "Done what?" "Run. Fight. Survive out here." Her gaze softened slightly. "I've been hunted since I was old enough to walk. Royal blood doesn't protect you from betrayal. My own court sold me to that tribe." Daniel felt a flicker of anger. "And you're planning to go back?" "Yes," she said firmly, "but not as their prisoner, as their reckoning." Before he could respond, a faint rustling below the gorge caught their attention. Daniel moved to the edge, peering down into the shadows. At first, he saw nothing, just the silver thread of the stream. Then movement. Figures. Several tribal warriors were making their way along the gorge floor, using the rocks for cover. They weren't charging. They were tracking, slowly, methodically. Kayla stepped beside him. "They've split their forces. These are scouts. The rest will come from behind." Daniel's mind raced. "Then we're trapped between them." Kayla's lips pressed into a thin line. "Unless we take the fight to the scouts now, before the others arrive." Daniel stood, tightening his grip on the machete. "Lead the way." They descended the rocky slope in silence, the crunch of loose stones barely audible over the faint gurgle of the stream. The warriors ahead hadn't seen them yet, their focus on the ground as they followed faint tracks. Daniel and Kayla moved as one. She struck first, her spear sweeping low to knock a warrior's legs from under him. Daniel followed with a hard swing of the machete, sending another sprawling. The fight was quick, brutal, and silent save for the splashes and grunts. When it was over, 3 warriors lay unconscious or worse, and the stream ran red in small eddies. Kayla didn't pause. "Now we move. The others will know soon." They climbed the far side of the gorge, the jungle ahead stretching dark and endless. But even as they moved, the distant drums began again, faster, louder. And this time, they were joined by a sound that chilled Daniel to his core. A horn. Long, low, and mournful, echoing through the night. Kayla's face hardened. "They've called the full hunt." Daniel didn't ask what that meant. From the look in her eyes, he knew everything the tribe had would now be coming for them. The horn faded into the distance, but its echo lingered in Daniel's chest like a warning he couldn't shake. Kayla's pace quickened, her eyes scanning every shadow as if expecting spears to fly from the darkness. The jungle was alive with noise now, crickets clicking, distant birds calling, leaves shivering under unseen movement. Somewhere far behind, the drums pounded again, now in a rapid, feverish rhythm. Daniel kept his machete in hand, the wake familiar and reassuring. "Tell me straight," he said quietly. "Full hunt. How bad is it?" Kayla didn't slow. "They will send every warrior. Men, women, even their trained beasts. They will not stop until one of us is dead. Why not just kill me and take you back?" he asked. Her gaze flicked to him. "Because now, by their law, you have stolen from them. You shamed their leader before the fire. They will make you suffer first." Daniel grunted. "Great. So we're both trophies." They wove through a stretch of tangled vines, the thick stems forcing them to push and twist their way through. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of wet moss. Every breath felt thick. As they emerged into a clearer patch, Kayla froze, raising a hand for silence. Daniel followed her gaze. Ahead, about 30 meters away, a group of warriors crouched low, moving in a wide arc. They carried long spears and nets that glimmered faintly in the dim light. These weren't just hunters, they were trappers. "They want us alive," Kayla whispered. Daniel's voice was low. "Not gonna happen." Before the trappers could close in, Kayla grabbed his arm and pulled him toward a narrow path that sloped upward. The ground here was slick with mud, forcing them to dig in their heels to climb. At the top, the jungle opened into a rocky ridge. From here, Daniel could see the firelight of the trappers below, flickering between the trees. "They'll follow us up," he said. "That's the point," Kayla replied. She knelt quickly, gathering stones and loose branches, placing them at the ridge's edge. "We make it costly for them." Daniel didn't need further explanation. He joined her, rolling a few heavy rocks into place. When the first warrior appeared below, climbing the slope with spear in hand, Daniel kicked one of the rocks loose. It tumbled down, bouncing off the warrior's shoulder and sending him sprawling back into two others. The sound of impact echoed through the night. Kayla hurled another, striking a second climber in the chest. He slid back into the darkness, cursing in his own tongue. But more were coming, their determination undimmed. Daniel's pulse raced. They couldn't hold this ridge forever. Time to go. Kayla nodded, and they retreated down the far side. This slope was steeper, the ground slick with moss, and both of them slid more than they walked. Daniel caught a vine to slow himself, feeling it tear against his palms. At the bottom, they landed in a shallow basin filled with mist. Strange plants grew here, their broad leaves glistening with dew, and the air was warmer, almost humid enough to taste. Daniel felt the hairs on his arms rise. Kayla's voice was barely above a whisper. "This place is dangerous. Do not touch the plants." Daniel glanced at her but didn't question. They moved through the basin, careful not to brush against the thick vine-like stems. A low hissing began somewhere to their right, and Kayla's hand twitched toward her spear. A massive plant stirred, its thick vines slowly coiling toward them like snakes. Daniel realized with a jolt that it wasn't just vegetation, it was a predator. The vines twitched again, reaching for Kayla's leg. Daniel reacted fast, slicing through the nearest vine with his machete. The plant shuddered, releasing a foul, sweet-smelling mist. Kayla grabbed his arm, pulling him into a sprint. The vines thrashed behind them, but they didn't follow far, retreating into the mist as quickly as they'd appeared. When they finally stopped, Daniel was breathing hard, his chest burning. "Your jungle's trying to kill us as much as the tribe is." Kayla gave a tight nod. "It has always been this way." The drums were closer now. They were coming fast, their voices raised in a hunting chant that rolled through the night. Daniel's muscles tensed. "We can't outrun them forever." "No," Kayla agreed, her eyes narrowing. "We must turn the hunt." Daniel stared at her. You mean fight them head on? Not all, she said. Only enough to break their will. Kill their leader, the rest will scatter. Daniel looked at her for a moment, then gave a short nod. Then we need bait. Kala's lips curved into the faintest dangerous smile. They think I'm the prize. Let's give them what they want. They moved toward a narrow canyon she knew, where the walls closed in tight. The plan was simple: draw them in, cut off their escape, and strike hard. It was risky, but risk was all they had left. By the time they reached the canyon, the first torchlight was visible behind them. Daniel glanced at Kala. Once this starts, there's no stopping. She met his gaze, fierce and unflinching. I have no intention of stopping. The drums grew louder, the chant sharper. The hunt was about to crash into them like a wave. Daniel took a deep breath, ready to face it head on. The canyon walls rose high on both sides, rough stone streaked with moss. The ground was uneven, scattered with loose rocks that crunched underfoot. The narrow path funneled the sound of the drums until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. Daniel stood near the center, gripping his machete so tight his forearm ached. Beside him, Kala's spear gleamed in the torchlight filtering in from behind. They didn't have to wait long. The first flicker of fire appeared at the canyon's mouth, followed by shadows, dozens of them. Tribal warriors poured in, their chants echoing off the stone. Spears, nets, and jagged blades glinted in the shifting light. Daniel's pulse pounded, but his focus was sharp. He wasn't thinking about running anymore. At the head of the warriors came the one with the feathered headdress, the same leader who had stood by the fire when Kala was bound above it. His eyes burned with hatred, his steps slow and deliberate. He raised his spear high, pointing it straight at Daniel. Daniel leaned toward Kala. That's him? She gave a single nod. Kill him, and the rest will break. The leader roared, charging forward. The warriors behind him surged, the canyon filling with the thunder of feet and the clatter of weapons. Daniel waited until the front line was nearly on them before he shouted, "Now!" From the rocks above, two heavy logs balanced carefully while they waited came crashing down. They smashed into the charging warriors, scattering them and blocking the path behind the leader. The trap had worked. The rest of the hunters were cut off. Daniel moved fast, meeting the leader's charge head on. The first strike of the spear glanced off the machete, sparks flying in the dark. Daniel stepped inside the next thrust, swinging his blade toward the man's shoulder. The leader twisted, the cut slicing only through feathers. Kala circled wide, blocking the leader's retreat. Her spear darted forward, forcing him to shift his stance. Daniel pressed the attack, each swing heavy and precise. The leader was strong, but Daniel fought with the desperate energy of someone who knew there was no other way out. The clang of metal on metal rang through the canyon. The leader slashed with his spear's butt, striking Daniel in the ribs. Pain flared, but Daniel didn't back off. He feinted low, then came up with a hard swing that knocked the spear from the leader's hands. Kala didn't waste the opening. She drove her spear forward, the tip cutting across the leader's chest. He staggered, blood dark against his painted skin. The chant of the warriors faltered, their eyes flicking between the fight and the blocked path. With a roar, the leader lunged barehanded at Daniel, trying to grapple. They slammed into each other, the force driving Daniel back into the stone wall. The leader's grip was crushing, but Daniel brought his knee up hard, breaking the hold. In one smooth motion, he raised the machete and swung. The blade struck deep. The leader's roar turned into a gasp, his body collapsing to the ground. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the torches. The warriors stared, their formation breaking apart like mist in the wind. Kala stepped forward, standing over the fallen leader. Her voice was clear and cold. "Your hunt is over." One by one, the warriors began to back away. Some dropped their weapons. Others turned and vanished into the shadows of the canyon mouth. The drums, still pounding far away, slowed and then stopped altogether. Daniel exhaled, the weight of the fight settling in. His ribs throbbed, his arms ached, but he stayed standing. Kayla came to his side, her eyes scanning the retreating hunters. "It's done," she said softly. They climbed out of the canyon together, the air fresh and cool above the stone walls. The jungle stretched before them, no longer filled with the sound of pursuit. For the first time since he'd heard her scream, Daniel felt the tension in his chest ease. At the edge of a clearing, Kayla stopped. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You've given me my life back. In my people's way, that makes you bound to me." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Bound how?" She allowed a small, rare smile. "As ally, as protector, as whatever path we choose together." Daniel chuckled faintly, shaking his head. "Guess I should have known rescuing a princess wasn't going to be simple." Her gaze softened. "You didn't have to come for me. But you did. That matters." They stood there for a moment, the jungle quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves. The danger was behind them, but both knew the road ahead would not be easy. Still, Daniel felt something new resolve, and a strange sense of belonging in this alien world. Kayla glanced toward the horizon, where the first light of dawn was beginning to push back the darkness. "Come," she said. "There is much to be done." Daniel adjusted his grip on the machete and followed her into the morning light, the memory of the hunt still sharp in his mind. He had stepped into this fight to save a stranger. Now he was walking into a future bound to her fate and ready for whatever came next.